All right, let's get to the other headlines of the day. My panel now, Shadow Environment Minister Jonathon Duniam and Senior Fellow at Menzies Research Centre, of course, columnist with The Australian, Nick Cater. Senator Nick, welcome. Nick, I'll start with you. I spoke about this at the top of the show, this tawdry use today of the Black Saturday anniversary, 15 years on today, by this mob, the Bushfire Survivors for Climate Change or Climate Action. What do you make of it?
Well, I think you're right to try and point to the origins of this organisation. Who are they? Well, it's astroturfing, plain and simple, Peter, which means, you know, setting up supposedly community organisations funded by money from elsewhere just to campaign. That's what this organisation is. It's no different from Farmers for Climate Action, which appeared in the news on Monday in favour of renewable energy ahead of the big demonstration yesterday outside Parliament House by local farmers and others who realise renewable energy is problematic. It's exactly the same. The funding sources are largely the same. They're coming from people largely with a vested interest in renewable energy. They won't be looking at nuclear, for instance. That's a dirty word. If you're one of these organisations, you mention nuclear, you're off the funding stream. That's the origin of this organisation. So what we see is very crass, offensive advertising, which is really carried out not as it purports to be from a grassroots group, although there may be some grassroots people attached, but being funded by people with vested interests in renewable energy. That's the facts.
And I must say again, a lot of the left are blockers on the recommendations from that Royal Commission about lifting our rate of hazard reduction burns. We're nowhere near meeting the targets that we said we would meet. We're not even meeting them halfway in Victoria. Jono, I know you've been caught up in the Senate. I want to know, has there been a guillotine put in place for that IR legislation? But a question in relation to the news today that the ABC's cancelled their plans, or sort of, in relation to this drag time story for kids in a Sydney library. These are children aged between 3 and 5. Huge community backlash, but the ABC statement says they are considering how they can safely host the event. Now, if adults want to go along to a drag queen show, knock yourself out, fair enough. But I tell you, I really reject this being pushed at children.
So do I, Peter. Just on the Senate, a deal has been done in some smoke-filled room at the back of Parliament House between Labor, the Greens and David Pocock. And so there is a guillotine. We'll sit till 9 o'clock tonight. And I think we get 2 hours to debate this legislation tomorrow. So far from transparency and accountability that was promised, along with lower power prices and not changing the tax rates for stage 3, we're not going to have any transparency. So a deal's done, and it looks like we'll have new IR laws coming in after tomorrow. But on drag story time, it is an abhorrent concept to put this sexualised form of adult entertainment in front of kids. I mean, in Tasmania, we had our state-run library system running drag story time, something I ran a campaign against locally because there was an artist, if you could call them that, Ms. Pussy Poppins, reading books to kids in the same age bracket. I mean, we may as well be getting pole dancers in to teach kids how to dance. It's madness and it should stop. I don't think the ABC really understands what its value is if they're contemplating this sort of stuff, and any government entity or any adult should not be exposing kids to this sort of thing. It's a disgrace.
Nick, what about the comments from the Prime Minister this morning, the UN's annual breakfast for women, and this was about his comments pertaining to gender equality, he says is one of the reasons behind the rise in domestic violence. Have a listen.
Even nations that lead the world on measures of gender equality are dealing with their own shocking rates of violence. Some of it, in the cruelest of ironies, occurring as a reaction to the progress being made.
Nick, this is pretty extraordinary.
It's a bizarre comment, Peter. I mean, if it's somehow connected with gender equality, you'd have to say by any measure gender equality is greater now than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. So how come this domestic violence is supposedly increasing in response to it? But I tell you what, domestic violence, of course, has many causes, but I tell you one of them, and I witnessed this firsthand recently in the town of Ceduna, that's the withdrawal of the cashless welfare card by the Albanese government, and the time I spent looking on the ground in Ceduna shows quite clearly that that's led to an increase increase in domestic violence there. So there are causes, but I fear that the Albanese government does not want to look at the real source of them, because some of them are directly linked to their action.
Now, here's one for my viewers. I know they're going to love this. This is an ex-Neighbours star. Her name's Holly Valance. She's now Holly Candy. She married a UK billionaire property developer. She's come out as a Conservative. Have a listen.
And have you always been a right of centre person, or are you a Conservative? Where are you politically?
I would say that everyone starts off as a lefty and then wakes up at some point after you start either making money, working, trying to run a business, trying to buy a home, and then realise what crap ideas they all are, and then you go to the right.
Crap. I think that's pretty sound, don't you, Jono?
I think that's right. I think people do wake up, the more responsibility they have, all these false dreams and promises made by the left which can never be paid for, never achieved, and I'm pleased. It's interesting listening to that journalist ask those questions as if this Holly Valance had some sort of disease because she was Conservative in her views now. I'm pleased that she's leading the charge for people in pop culture to wake up and go Conservative. More of it, I say.
Nick Cater, what about this viral video where a teacher in the US challenges a student for calling J.K. Rowling a transphobe? Have a listen.
Let's define bigoted opinions. What opinions are bigoted?
Live your best life.
Do you find that transphobic?
I'm just going with what a lot of other people have said.
At the beginning of this conversation, you said, given the fact that J.K. Rowling is transphobic, how do you feel about Harry Potter?
Oh, I feel like an idiot now.
Nick, it's about time we got some teachers teaching, pushing back, demanding critical thinking from students for just these throwaway lines.
And he did it so well, I thought, Peter. He did it without really, raising his voice. He just pointed out the logical errors in what the student had said, and the student, in the end, admitted it made a mistake. And I thought it was a masterclass not only in what teachers should be doing, and I hope there are more of them than we see on YouTube videos, but also a masterclass in really how to address these woke ideas and the fact that, everybody says something. It's what other people say, so it must be true. Well, let's challenge these things at their foundation, as this teacher so masterfully did.
Just quickly, Jonathon Duniam, we saw protests again today, pro-Palestinian protests, more fire and brimstone stuff from the Greens, some would say even unhinged commentary. How's that going down amongst all other politicians in Canberra? Because there used to be a general accord, Greens aside, to support Israel.
Yeah, there was. Sadly, I think that the left of the Labor Party have really infected their thinking on this matter and probably foreign policy more broadly. Yesterday in Question Time, Penny Wong tried to link the coalition to the Greens when they asked a question around how evil Israel is and why Australia is standing by Israel. It is a real concern, and I think the left of politics has too much say and too much sway through the media, through academia, and of course here in government as well. But thankfully, most people in the community, regardless of what happens here in Parliament, see sense and know that we should be backing Israel, the peace-loving nation that it is.
Senator Duniam, thank you. Nick Cater, thank you. As always, see you both next week.